Yeah, and he said we haven't heard anything from them. We don't know where they are, and they were hiking this really dangerous place and everything. And I mean, I think Steve thought you guys were dead. I really do. I mean, it just the way that he presented to me anyway, it sounded like you guys were gone. Hi everybody, I'm Alyce-Kay, and this is my mom. You want to introduce yourself, or should they call you mom?
I'm Lyn Hanush. I'm also Alyce-Kay's mom, so that works. And I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
So anyway, today we're going to talk about the California Prayerwalk. And this one's a little bit different because we were both involved in this, but we were involved in kind of different ways. So we'll be able to tell different stories about this prayer walk. Mom, do you want to tell what it was, first of all?
This was a prayer walk for the state of California. It was walking from mission to mission, the California missions.
Mission trail.
That were, yes, the mission trail. That's correct. And it was a prayer walk that many people were brought in on. It wasn't just a small 2 or 3 people group, but there were 22 or 23 of us.
23.
Yeah.
23 of us who were like the core team, but almost every place that we went, people from that city joined us. And I think even in San Francisco, we had about 200 people. So there were a lot of people that ended up getting involved in this in one way or another, even though there was just 23 on the core team that did the whole thing. And none of us walked the entire mission trail. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, each morning we were given our assignment and what group we would be with, what group of people, and a section that we were to walk. And then we were given a driver who would meet us, drop us off, pick us up, etc.
And check on us once in a while. Well, not your group, but the rest of us common folks. Mom, what group were you in?
We were called the Power Group or the Wow Group.
I think he called you the Bungee Group, didn't he?
And the Bungee Group too, yes.
Yes, because
several different names.
Right, because he said these 3 people, it was 3 of you, right? He said these 3 people will get across even if it takes a bungee cord. So he always gave them the hardest things, the places where there was just a train track hanging over, a drop or something like
or a river to wade through that was flowing fast because it was flooding.
Yeah, I really think you guys should have been the Indiana Jones group or something like that. None of us thought of that at that time. But anyway, so we need to backtrack a little bit and tell a little bit more about how this started and everything. So there were 2 leaders of it.
Yes, there was Steve Hawthorne and Mike Griffith. And they came up with this idea through some circumstances that you can probably tell a little bit better.
Well, I'll tell a little bit of it, but actually I recently ran across a video where Steve actually talks about every detail of it. So I'll include that. I'll link that below because that's a really cool video where he talks about it. But in general, what happened was Steve Hawthorne is really big on prayer walking, and he wrote a book called Prayerwalking, Praying on Site with Insight. I'll link that below too. Excellent book about prayer walking. And it's just one way to do prayer walking, but it's a way that's easy for anybody to do. It's not just about these big walks. And he and Mike were driving in California. I think they were in San Francisco, and they started having this idea of having a walk all the way up the mission trail. And they wanted to get the I can't remember what it was called. There is a group that did these yearly things that were really big. March for Jesus. They wanted to get March for Jesus involved, but March for Jesus, their organization felt that it would be too complicated. And I think it would have been too complicated for a big organization like that to put together. So Mike and Steve decided to plan this, and they decided that it would be really cool to end on Palm Sunday in San Francisco, and that 40 days would be very appropriate because there's so many things in the Bible about 40 days. And what was really fun, Mom and I both knew that this was basically Lent, and we kind of assumed that had something to do with Lent. I don't know. I don't think there were any Catholics on the group.
I don't think so.
And I'm Catholic now, but I wasn't then. But we vaguely knew about Lent, and we knew that that's when it was approximately. And so we thought it had something to do with it. Well, we got to the first place, the Mission San Diego, and that's where we found out that the leaders didn't know that it was about Lent, that was the time of Lent, because the priests there told us.
Yeah.
So what do you remember about the beginning, Mom?
And I remember that they put the ashes on our foreheads for each of us, and so we had those ashes through the day, and as a reminder.
You're made from dust, and to dust you shall return.
Right.
It was in a cross, and those ashes were made from the branches. The palm branches from the year before are burned, and then they take those ashes and they do that. And the priests there explained all that to us, and they taught us a song, and they taught us how to dance to it.
And it was really cool, though, the time
so
we were
neat.
there. Yeah, it really was. And I was really blessed just to hear a lot of this, because I hadn't really heard a lot of that before. And
I didn't know any of it.
Brand new, and so it was nice.
Yeah, I just knew, like, my friends growing up who were Catholic, oh, I'm giving this up for Lent. That's all I knew about Lent. So it was, so we learned a lot. And as we left the first mission, San Diego, do you remember what we found on the ground?
No.
Okay. All right. This is one of the most exciting things to me that I love telling about is, here we're doing this march to Palm Sunday, and it just happened, one of those God incidences, that the city of San Diego had decided to trim all their palm trees that day. And so there were palm branches all over the ground. And here we are marching towards Palm Sunday. And so we were all able to pick up and carry palm branches that first day. It just was like a really neat procession. And I think it was just the 23 of us that day.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm glad you reminded me of that, because we did that at the end too.
Right.
So this will all tie together.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and talk about that, about the end. We don't have to do all this in order. Okay. Why do things in an orderly fashion, right?
Exactly.
So what happened at the very end about the palm branches?
At the very end, we were walking up Dolores Avenue in San Francisco, which is the street that the mission is on. And we were walking up that street. It's a big street, has palm trees all the way down. And the day before, they had trimmed the palm branches, so they were all on the ground. And again, we all picked them up and carried them.
Us and about 200 people.
Exactly.
So it was a huge procession of palm branches.
Yes. And it was beautiful. It was just amazing.
Yeah, it was just really, it was so cool. And it was just so neat that it was bookended that way, because that didn't happen anyplace else on the walk. It was just the very first day, which was Ash Wednesday, the first day of Lent. And then it was on Palm Sunday that we had those palm branches both times. That was just amazing. So it was really cool. We saw a lot of things like that on this walk. Okay, so since we're taking everything out of order, let's go back to the very, very beginning. How did you first hear about it?
I think a friend of Dad's told me about it.
Okay.
Maybe it was Plow's brother.
Luis Plow's brother. Oh, yeah.
Ruth's husband.
Ed Silvoso. Yeah,
Ed Silvoso.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, Ed Silvoso told him about it. And so, it seemed like, an interesting thing. I wasn't sure I was really interested, but Dad wanted me to do it. And so eventually, I talked about it. I mentioned it to you.
And I was like, I want to do this. And it was just, this would be so cool with my kids. Oh my goodness, homeschool. Yeah, we're homeschooling on this thing.
Exactly. So we ended up, you and your 3 girls and me all signed up for it, and they accepted us, and they wanted us.
And at that time, I had just the 3 girls, and they were 6, 7, and 8 years old. So they were small. But Steve really wanted some children on this. And he wanted, people of all different races, and he just wanted it to be a real mixture and stuff. And so,
and for us, it was like 3 generations.
Right. Yeah, that's right. It was 3 generations.
Which was another thing. So,
yeah, that was really cool too. I don't think either of us had we had been prayer walking, but we weren't calling it that up to that point, right? Exactly. I don't think I'd ever heard that term before, but we had both been doing different forms of prayer walking, because our family, for a few generations at least, is really into prayer. And Grandpa Black prayer
very
walked all the
much.
way around his farm, and I used to go do that with him. I'm assuming you probably did at some point too, right? Did you?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
No, you were privileged.
He liked me.
He did. My stepdad loved Alyce-Kay. Let
Apparently
me tell
because I
you.
said yes instead of no when I was little.
That's right. Yeah, like most babies, most kids go this way when you ask them something. She always went this way. And to him, that won him over.
So he influenced me a lot. But yeah, so we did a lot of praying, and I had been teaching my kids to pray about different things that we saw
Yeah.
when we walked. We did a lot of our homeschooling while we were walking. And so this was just kind of, and my oldest daughter, the first time that she walked 6 miles, she was 2 years old. So, and then we did that regularly. And I think I've talked about that in another video. So, so walking was just a normal thing for us, for all of us. Mom obviously did a lot of walking.
And let me say that with Brenda too, when they were making the assignments all the time, they weren't assigning her some very heavy walking a lot of times. And she finally was upset about it. And she said, I practiced, I prepared to walk, and I want to walk. And they started putting her with me a lot of times, which I thought was really neat.
Yeah, it was, because we had worked on it. We had done quite a few 20-mile walks to get the kids into shape and stuff. And we would sometimes sing while we were walking because that would build up your air capacity and everything. So the girls really were in good shape to walk.
Absolutely. And wasn't it on your birthday that for your birthday gift, I came over and you and the three girls and me, we all walked, was it 20 or 30 miles?
And Judy and Julie Galatro. Yeah, it was planned to be 20 miles, but we ended up walking like an extra 5 or 6 miles,
something
I think.
like that. Yeah.
So, yeah, that was really neat.
So,
and some of it was uphill because we went up to the reservoir, right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Yeah, and not the best weather, because getting ready for this, because this started in February, so a lot of our training was taking place in January, and not great weather. So, but that was good. And okay, well, since we're not doing things in order, there's a reason why that ended up being very providential. Do you want to tell about that? About the storm of the century?
Oh, the storm of the century. Oh, yeah. Yeah. In the middle of the walk, at some point, we had horrible storms, and the flooding every place we went. You would see watermarks way up on the side of homes or business buildings and such. And
on the news, they were calling it the storm of the century.
Yeah, they were. And every place was flooded. There were places we couldn't get through, and there were other places. We found some ways to get through.
That's why we had the bungee team. Yeah.
And then we had one place where we had to go through a river, had to get across this river, and it was at flood stage. And so we linked arms or held hands and walked across all together. The 4 of us, I believe, that were together at that time. And Steve was in that group that time too.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah.
So there was, with the whole storm of the century thing, this all happened in like the southern part of California. And during that period, almost every day, I think there was a period where there was like every day before we stepped outside, it was just like storming and raining. And we're like, oh gosh, can we walk through this? This is horrible. And as soon as we stepped outside, it cleared up. And then at the end of the day, we'd walk into a church or something, and all of a sudden, tons of rain. And it was like God was just holding it back for us. And then we got to Atascadero, and it started raining while we were walking. But it turns out that I think Atascadero means something like stuck in the mud. So it was very appropriate.
And it was flooding some areas there in Paso Robles as we walked through, and our team had to walk through a culvert that was filled with water. And so we took off our shoes. Brenda was with us, Mike and Shari and me, and we walked through. We took pictures and everything, and then we walked through. And then later was the river further on up.
So since we're talking about the bungee team, what was the most challenging thing that you guys did, or three most challenging or something?
Okay, we had a couple of mountains that we were assigned to because most of the people were not hikers, and
Yeah.
we were. And so that's why we were given the harder things, because we were hikers. And so we went over this mountain. I wish I could remember the name of it now, but it was really fun, and we got some fantastic views and everything. And
Well, there was one where you guys were climbing a mountain,
oh yeah,
and you guys were gone all day, and the rest of the team, we had gotten back and we were waiting for you. I think it might have been raining too. And Steve Hawthorne came and he sat me down and he said, I need to talk to you. And he made sure nobody else was around or anything. He goes, we haven't been able to find your mom. And I think it was Mike and Shari, right? We haven't been able to find
it was
Dave
actually
Hewitt.
David Hewitt and Shari and me and Mike.
Okay.
Mike was our driver that day.
Okay. Yeah. So it was you and David and Shari.
Sorry.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
he said we haven't heard anything from them. We don't know where they are, and they were hiking this really dangerous place and everything. And I mean, I think Steve thought you guys were dead. I really do. I mean, it just the way that he presented to me anyway, it sounded like you guys were gone. And then he just said, "Okay, I just wanted to tell you before I tell the rest of the team, and we're going to be praying, and stuff." And so we were praying. And so then, what was happening with you guys?
Okay, and that was the story I was thinking about. And so
Okay.
uh, we we had gotten to a certain point where there was a fork in the road, and we chose the wrong way. So we went up to the top of a mountain, and we got up there, and there were fences, and there were um, radio towers and such, and we weren't supposed to be up there. And there were fences that were saying no trespassing. And there was no place else to go. We had to turn around and go back. We
And you
realized,
don't want to say I'm trespassing because I'm prayer walking. Hello.
no, no, but we did pray for those radio towers,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I remember that.
and which was really interesting, because later when we moved there, which we had no idea we were going to do that, I would see those towers and think, I prayed up there for this area
Mhm.
and for those radio stations.
There was
And that was
something about
really
it
cool.
though, too. Wasn't there, like, it ended up that there was a Christian radio that was trying to get on to that and they were having some kind of
Yes,
problem or something?
yes, there was. And they
Yeah.
got on, I think shortly after that.
Yeah. And you guys had
Uh,
no idea that's what you were praying
no,
for, Eva, which I think
absolutely
that's an
not.
important thing to know is sometimes God will put something on your heart or put you in a situation where you pray for something and you don't really
Exactly.
even know what you're praying for.
Right. Absolutely. And that's so true. And
Now
it
you
was
had
raining the whole time we were going up.
Right. Which is part of the reason
And
that we were so scared because
yeah,
there had been a lot of mudslides and stuff,
yeah,
and it could have been involved in a mudslide that, you wouldn't have been found for months.
yeah.
And you had made a decision at the beginning of that day between things you were going to put in your fanny pack.
And I had decided not to put my extra phone battery in there.
Right. And what
And
did you
those
bring
are
instead? You brought something else instead that was really important.
probably chocolate.
Yes. So mom decides chocolate is more important than an extra phone battery.
So my phone ran out of battery service.
And how many of you ladies would have made the exact same decision?
Yeah,
Be honest.
funny. I was talking to a lady at church today, and we were talking about the important things, how important things were to eat, and I'm not a big donut person, so they have donuts at church every Sunday, and I don't eat them most of the time. And she said, you can have it once a week. And I says, well, it's not that I, want it so much. I really don't care. I could care less. I says, however, I do have my faults. I said, at home, I eat 2 teaspoons of chocolate fudge frosting every day. And she says, okay. She says, well, I'm with you. Chocolate is most important.
Yep.
So, and she did have a chocolate donut with chocolate frosting. I says, I just eat the frosting.
Yep. Yep. So you guys were up there and your battery ran out on your phone. So you had no
Yeah,
phone, no way to
yeah.
reach anybody. But you did something up there since you couldn't call for help. What'd you do?
We prayed.
I know, but you guys yelled. You yelled yes, they yelled a prayer. They were yelling help really loud. And did Mike hear you then or something, Mike Milligan?
He heard us. And we started walking back down, and we were still doing that every so often. And he came walking up and met us.
Yeah,
He found
okay.
us.
Yeah.
And so then we got back to the car, and we were soaking wet. And they drove us to where the team was meeting, and we, we had that opportunity to share of how God had been with us. And
yeah,
I don't think I was ever really concerned.
well, you knew where you were. You knew you weren't in a mudslide.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't know that. I thought you might have been I thought you were at the bottom of a pile of mud.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, they walked in, and we were like, when we saw them walk in, we were like half clapping and half bawling. I was bawling.
Yeah.
And I think that somebody had taken my girls out when Steve announced it, so that they wouldn't hear it either. So they didn't know what was going on.
Right.
Because it was just it was very serious. I mean, we just really thought that we had lost them because there was no contact, and there had always been enough precautions taken to make sure, that I think Steve and Mike were very Mike Griffiths. I think that they were very safety conscious for all of us. And so this was kind of, even with the bungee team, they were safety conscious. And so this was just like, it was very serious. It was scary. And yeah, and I remember you were like, well, why were you guys so worried?
Yeah.
That's because you knew you were okay. We didn't.
Right. Yeah.
And I think Mike Milligan had been a little worried too, because he couldn't call you guys.
He was. Yeah, he was, as our driver, and he couldn't find us where we were supposed to be because we had taken the wrong turn, and we didn't know the area. So it was, we figured that was the way, and it wasn't.
Yeah. There was another situation. Now, I can't remember the details on this, Mom, so I can't save you if you can't remember it. Something with a train trestle, and you weren't sure if there was a train coming or something.
Right. Yeah, there was a train crossing where they were doing some work on the train trestle, and they didn't want us to go past. They didn't want us to go over it. And so we were trying to figure out another way to get around it. And there just wasn't another way that would, except it would take us way out. And we couldn't do that right then. So we went back to them again. We stopped and we prayed, and then we went back to them again. And just at that moment, the superintendent or supervisor, a bigger, better guy, he came along, and he heard, and he says, no problem. He says, so-and-so will take you across. So we had to be escorted across.
Oh, good. Okay.
And we were escorted across in between the times that the trains were supposed to be coming across there.
Right. Because if you had been on the trestle at the time that the train came, either you would have been smashed or you would have to jump to your death.
Right. And once we got over, we had just gotten over when we heard the train, and here comes Amtrak crashing through, slam dunk real fast. And they were at their top speed at that point. And we had just gotten off. So God was really watching over us.
It wouldn't have done any good that the supervisor was with you. They wouldn't have stopped. Yeah. So okay.
I had to go back across too.
Oh yeah. And you're all, here's a bungee cord. No.
Yeah.
So okay, so we've told like some of these adventures and stuff, but what was the purpose of this whole prayer walk?
Was to pray for California, but we were praying for
repentance,
like the Native American Indians.
Okay, so yeah, we were asking for forgiveness from them.
And so that was a lot of it, because there had been a lot of bad things done to them, not only where we were, but across the nation too.
Right.
But particularly where we were is what we were praying for. And so we met with a lot of Indian tribes, and, or a few of them, I'm not sure.
The
there was
leaders
some.
of those, and asked for their forgiveness and had some really beautiful times.
And oh yeah, we gave gifts to them sometimes, and they gave gifts to us, and it was just amazing to see things happen and to experience that.
And things with other people too, like Seiko. We had a Japanese woman who was part of the team. Just, oh, she was so wonderful. And when we were up in San Francisco, she was just remembering, because we went through the parking lot of Tanforan Mall, which used to be Tanforan Race Course, and her family had been interred in World War II. Were they actually interred at Tanforan, or just a similar? They were at Tanforan.
I think that was where they were, if I remember right.
Okay. Yeah. And so she was, so she was telling about that. And I'm gonna include a video, you guys, a link to a video below, a professional video about the prayer walk, and you'll see her talking about that and talking about what she realized while she was there, and you'll see the process of praying for forgiveness for that. It was really just beautiful. We talked a lot about two different kinds of sorrows.
Oh yes, godly sorrow and worldly sorrow.
Right. Do you want to explain that?
Well, worldly sorrow, let me start with that one. Worldly sorrow is where we are moaning about the fact that, oh yes, this is horrible, but we're not visualizing the sin that has caused this so much. And godly sorrow sees the depth of what is happening, and our sorrow is from God, and it's him through us praying for these circumstances and these people.
Yeah, it's godly sorrow is what breaks God's heart.
Yeah.
And worldly sorrow is what breaks my heart, kind of.
Exactly.
Not led by God, but it's what, what hurts me, what pains do I have that aren't the same as what breaks God's heart. Yeah. And that was kind of a theme throughout the whole walk. And this wasn't something that was planned by the leaders. A lot of this is stuff that the Holy Spirit just brought out at various points in the walk. It was really cool how that worked.
Hi, everybody. So I hope that you're enjoying our little reminiscing of things that happened about 30 years ago. So some of the time we're having problems remembering the details, but I hope that you're getting an inkling of some of the ways that God works. These are kind of big examples, but I hope that that helps you to recognize the smaller things in your life and the importance of having faith, and some of the lessons that we've talked about, like godly sorrow and worldly sorrow. Again, let me just say that we're not suggesting that you all go and walk like the whole state of California or anything like that. Or my mom actually has walked all the way across the US also, prayer walked. But you can just prayer walk in your neighborhood, or like sometimes, because I can't really walk very much, I'll prayer walk from my porch. I will imagine walking through places in my town and praying for it. But I really do encourage you to go out and actually walk so that you can see things. Like Steve Hawthorne says, praying on site with insight. You get insights from what you see by being on site. Anyway, we will continue this, so be watching for that. We love you all. Bye-bye.